Okay. Forensic intelligence. From the meaning forensic in ancient times, it meant to appear before the forum, and intelligence is the so-called ability to resolve situations in novel and different circumstances. It's probably about as easy as we can get to that. Um, I actually ran the forensic intelligence project in the Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, in the from the year 2002 through to 2008, when I completed my 40 years service. And as a result of that, was able to publish a book called Forensic Intelligence by an American publisher, Taylor and Francis. What this is about is not just, obviously the end game is to get the single case to court, and all the rules and all the standards to do with that are there. Unfortunately, the majority of forensic exhibits get filed and they get stored, or some get destroyed. So to use that resource, which can be over 80% of what's recovered, and look at the attrition model of a single case and the stages of it, and what the role of using forensics as an intelligence source, and Homeland Security kindly supplied a new term for it, FORINT, F-O-R-I-N-T. I didn't use those words, but that came from them. And on the front cover of the book here, we see the crime scene. It's examined, we get a result, then we take the person goes to the custody suite. Now, the police have a role here in recovering the evidence from that person. And how you do that and what rights you've got to do it are all to do with the legislature. And in our case, we had to change the rules of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, 1984, so that we could actually take DNA from everyone for a recordable offence, fingerprints, and their footwear, because we have a National Footwear Reference Collection. The NIJ's had a National Footwear Study done. I don't think you've got that yet, but individual forces have got collections and so on. And it goes to the lab, gets processed, and if you saw the rest of this picture, there's a red carpet leading to the court and the judge. Anyway, I'm with the European Forensic Institute, and I had the honour of being elected the honorary editor of the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences this year. So I'm in post for 3 years. So forensic intelligence, the reason I've produced this is it's got a lot of interest in the States now. The NIJ have issued guidance for dealing with forensic intelligence, November 2024. If you go online to them, you will find this document. This is just a copy of the front page. Is it something new? Well, not in Britain, it isn't, but it is. It looks as if the NIJ is looking to provide some flexibility in this, but guidance. So if we look at their PDF that they've sent out, they talk about the organisation, the processes, the technologies, the capability and resources and information sharing. So it has to have a leadership team, has to have a common purpose. So this is in this guidance, which is rather well written. I quite like it. What you have to do, though, is produce a working business model, an intel model for your force. You have to produce documentation that give the four main intelligence products. And we'll have a look at that in a minute. Once you've got those forms of documentation and the way you store them, they're available for supervision because you've got to maintain standards. And of course, intelligence has things in it that are not in the single case crime report. There are things that are hearsay information from people. So all of the sources, human intelligence, geographical, open source, signals, and records, criminal records, public records, and so on, are all in the intel arena. And of course, now we can make use of forensics as a source. In fact, we have a module in our BSc Forensic Science course at the European Forensic Institute all about that. And the European Forensic Institute hosts the European Association of Crime Analysts, and they are part of the worldwide association, which is based in the States, the Association of Crime Analysts. Which you can find online if you've got an interest. So what is it? I had a working definition for forensic intelligence because Lausanne University produced one which says it can give another layer of consideration, another layer of product above that which is traditionally available in investigations, because you're looking at the evidence types across the whole of your database, but you're also looking at the crime types, the behaviors. So we've got analytical data, the standard traditional sort of 9 analytical processes, and then we can add this as well. So to me, it was the application of forensic science to crime intelligence to determine the facts at issue and enable the production of intelligence products. They come in documentation and in computer file format, and they're for action in the areas of linking crimes and the matching of offenders to crimes. And the methods, there's nothing strange about them. They're all things we know: matching of fingerprints, DNA profiling, chemical, biological analysis, physical marks, coding and categorization of forensic data, and so on. Because a lot of the non-biometric forms of evidence, of course, we can go back to Lockhart, and Lockhart said there's a main classification for evidential types, and then there are secondary and tertiary classifications. If we record those in the crime reports, can image them, scan them somehow, make use of them, we can produce data in a usable format for analysts. But again, we have to be able to supervise all of that. I produced that methodology in a paper in Science and Justice I published in 2001, which you can find from the Chartered Society's website. They've been pulling the papers out and putting them into PDFs, because it did disappear for a while. So in investigations, that's kind of a doctrine of investigation. You need to understand how a particular crime has been committed, the type of material, and by material, anything that's evidential. Statements, CCTV, DNA, material is that one word that may have been generated in the commission of the offence. And we try to identify linked series, crimes committed with the same methodology, profiles, and forensics. And they are active ways of progressing investigations. And we can reinforce the links through sub-methods and other evidential links. Now, it's not just the homicides, it's everything, because you find quite often criminals will actually do things in the volume area and then do something really nasty. And if you're not geared up for this, you're going to find that what you're looking for is something stored somewhere that's only got a general descriptor of it. So where the key areas are, we can, if we're using a proactive intelligence model, predict future offending patterns or attempt to do that. We can predict, and we might even get to the point where we can actually have police operations. So you need an intel product for that to give the evidence why police might want to run an operation and run surveillance and so on. It's all part of the evidence that you have to supply to get the permissions to do the surveillance, and identify likely disposal routes. So you get network analysis and so on involved in all of this. If you're an analyst and you haven't got a basic awareness of forensic techniques and the basis of crime analysis, if you're just using analysts for that, they're not likely to go back and have meetings with people in laboratories or who may not be supplying the kind of product you want in the way you want it if you want to do this. So it's a partnership. You have to work with the team. So you've got the investigators, you've got the forensic services, and you've got the crime analysts, if you've got an intelligence directorate and the force. Why do we consider it? Well, it's truth and probability. All the things an analyst can look at crimes, they can look at distribution and look at methods, they can look at all sorts of things. But if you've got something that is a DNA link, it's pretty well infallible, or a fingerprint link. Footwear can fall into that category in the linking of scenes. But comparative crime analysis is Bayesian in nature, it's probability. So, and through physical evidence, the proof is enabled to link and detect and prosecute. It's all about truth and probability, and after all, philosophy is the love of truth. It's the kind of thing when you start exploring this. This subject is quite vast. If you look at my book, and you can look at a bit of it just online from Rutledge's site, you look at the contents of it, it's quite large. It's quite a large subject. So The linking process in forensics, they can be conclusive, highly significant, moderately significant, have little significance, or not linked, can eliminate. Now, I've used those words because in the UK, forensic scientists mostly use those expressions in their statements. That means that in the intelligence world, we can use that as A, B, C, D, E, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a 5 by 5 system. So if something is A1 and you've got a complete DNA link between two scenes, A1, no problem. If it's a shoe print, it's the same pattern and the wear, but its quality's not good, that could be C2, C3. If you've got a dodgy informant in intelligence, somebody who's telling police things, but sometimes they lie, they could be a D2 and so on. So, and then the final number, so those first two, A1 is all about the quality. The last one is the decision making of how confidential the intelligence log is going to be. So in the Met Police, we had the QQCSE form, QQ Crime Scene Examiner. Nothing in the English language starts with two Qs, so you know it's an intelligence log. So if they had intel, they are allowed to put it on the system. So what you find is you don't have people blocked from using the intelligence system in the policing organisation that have permissions up to restricted level. That's in the organisation. Obviously, you can still have confidential, top secret, and all those other things that block anybody from looking at things that shouldn't be looked at. So that's the attributes there. So the actual structures of the way that the outputs come from the laboratories and the experts can be embedded into that system. The other thing is it gives us an individual case match capability, which is great. We're going to go court one job, prove it. But it gives us a global in-system collection of matchable suspects data. This happens nationally with the DNA database. It's a global system. It links scenes, it links people to scenes, identifies people. Same with the AFIS system, ident1, or the fingerprint systems. But you can also have other scene of crime data that is global in system to align to that. And you can have a cold search identification capability. This leads to another form of documentation, the one where it's a case review, but it meets the criminal procedure rules required by the courts or the civil procedure rules, because not all casework in forensics is actually criminal. We deal with civil casework, we deal with explosions, building collapses, accidents and so on that are outside of that area. And it gives us a case linking capability that we wouldn't have otherwise if we didn't deal with this. And it gives us the evidence recovery frequency data. So in probability, the analyst can say, how rare is this? What's the sampling rate? If we get all that sorted out in that business model, then we can comply with our NIJ guidance in a very practical way. And we can share data in force, cross force, or nationally, or even internationally. So forensics are specific, persistent, graded in support or otherwise of suggested hypotheses, because in intelligence, you deal with hypotheses, not always with absolute truths that you could just go to court with. You can imply links, prove links, identify individuals, profile them, eliminate them, or you can start a case, progress a case, or solve a case. So here we have the single case model. And Eric mentioned you take all the material from the scene, 1,000 exhibits. It's a serious scene. If it's a volume crime one, it might be 20 or 30. But that's a total. Then you decide what the police are going to focus on, or the investigator. And then that goes to a lab, and then a small amount of that goes to court. But where is the resolution? Sometimes in an unsolved case, it's going to be outside of that. It's going to be in the big world of intel. It's going to be out there. The information of what you're looking for, what you might find in here that will relate back to outside of there. So the intelligence system gives you access into those areas. Whereas if you're just focusing on a single case, which you've got to deal with, happy days. But if you then find you have a problem, you've identified a problem, you've then produced a product, police service is tasked and coordinated, finds a suspect, makes an arrest, then you've got that material that you hopefully is going to match and you're going to get a result. So that's why that works. So what about the documentation? It's important to create the model using the organization's assets and police services, and there's thousands of them in America. There's small police services. There's not so many in the UK. So there are only three assets in intelligence. There are system assets, which are all your systems, crime reporting system, stop system, criminal records, all of that, and even your AFIS systems. If you don't know about, you're not getting a hit on an ident on a forensically aware team that are committing lots of offences. You need to have a word with the bureau. You have to say, have you orientated all these prints correctly? Have you manually checked with the AFIS system what's a characteristic? Have you actually got hold of this big list of suspects we've got, like 200 of them, and actually make sure there's no blurred or wrong images sitting there in the system that you can swap with a spare one? And then you suddenly find you get more idents because AFIS systems can miss poor marks up to 30%. So there's your murderer or whoever you're looking for sitting in this. You need to know about all of this. The system assets and the knowledge assets or knowledge of the law, knowledge of due process, knowledge of your area, knowledge of the criminal population, and so on. And then the intelligence assets are your people inside and outside the organization. Now, the documentation, the organization needs to set strategies because it's got a big problem with, say, gun crime, big problem with whatever, sets a strategy. The different business groups inside a policing organization will also have strategies. And out of those, the people that are tactically dealing with all this will produce tactical assessments. You can even do that in forensics. I mean, are you supporting how you get to the scene of a particular series properly? Are you dealing with it as a serious scene? Are your people going to be there within an hour and so on? That you can make a forensic assessment on that and actually have a service level agreement on certain things if you want to, if you know what's going on. Now, if you've got a problem, you've got a cluster of crimes or linked crimes, it's a problem profile. That's a document that is documentary form. And you can have tactical profiles, but you can also have subject, sorry, I put the wrong word in, the subject profiles or target profile. That's where you've got named people to look at. So those can be put on systems and supervised and developed, and they can either be shelved if there's nothing happening, actioned, or they're there and will be triggered if anyone searches the systems. So we can produce identifiable products and intelligence logs. We can supervise those and we can get performance data, enabling identification and training. Where we find one section is not performing well, I used to send them for refresher training. I wrote refresher training programs. Footwear quality wasn't good because they were filing the stuff, not going to main systems. So we did something about it and it rapidly improved the results. Forensic data should include intervention rates. That's what the percentage of the crimes you go to. Is your service acting a cherry picking model? You only go if this, you only go if that. We tried to go to 100% of burglaries. We actually used to get into 85%. So an analyst knows that that's a high sampling rate. If it's 20%, what's about the other 80? It's like a load of dots trying to make a picture. You don't see the picture. And it enables crime analysis and Bayesian evaluations by analysts. That's the probability and factual. So what can be seen in the realms of criminology with this? If we look at this kind of thing, a routine activity theory, Cohen and Felsen, they're the two that produced the crime triangle that Brantingham hung their Brantingham model on. We've got rational choice theory. These are all psychologists. So you live there, you go to work and you commit offences on the way when you get opportunities. You've got a relative, you do the same thing, visiting a friend, or if you're going wherever. So they have a living space that they work with. They evaluate the risk. That goes all the way back to 1738. And they take the principle of least effort. So we look at, what's his name, Kim Rosmo with Rigel, the geographical profiling program. He worked on a lot of statistics in an American police service to produce his software. And sometimes you see buffer zones. So when you map the forensic evidence, and this is corridor theory from Ian Oldfield, I'm now working with in a little firm called Crime Science Limited, which I'll tell you something about. But the most of the work I do is with the European Forensic Institute. So the offender's living space, David Cantor, the psychologist who wrote the book Investigative Psychology, visited offenders in jail, asked them to draw maps where they committed their offences, and some of them cooperated. Aren't they showing offences here? They just don't go there. They only do certain streets and things. That's their living space. So let's look at a real job. There's an offender living there. We get a forensic intelligence product, which is a few linked scenes between here and here. And I think we had 27 scenes, but then we did comparative case analysis in depth on it all. And we unravel over a period of over a year, this person committing about 3 offences a week. And you notice that corridor theory, they're going this way and that way. And when they started out, they were down here. There's number 4, number 3, there's the outlier, number 1. You've got to remember, we started with tool marks with this. Then we had a fingerprint hit. Then the person's DNA was taken because they were taken into custody. They didn't have a criminal record number. And then we got a couple of DNA hits. And this is the map used with a spreadsheet to drive the person around so they could pick out all the addresses that they burgled. And in fact, some of them they'd done 2 or 3 times because they'd been back and the people who were victims had moved, but they never go down these streets. So what we're finding is this kind of thing. So when you see this emerging in an analytical process, it does tend to reinforce something as bad is going on here. The first one of these I ever did, the screwdriver, I sent it to a police service in 2001, I think, and said, you've got a linked series of 10mm screwdriver marked burglary. And they said, we don't think so. You can buy a 10mm screwdriver in any shop. I said, yeah, but in the whole of northwest London, there's only one cluster of these, and it's on the border of your division and the next one. And it's only half a mile across. And it's only Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I said, you think sort of Sputnik dropped that or something? Anyway, within a week, the burglar had been disturbed and stabbed somebody to death with the screwdrivers. We got the screwdriver, it was sticking out of the victim's chest. They then took it seriously. So if we go on, what about this form? You can see this in mapping. This is the Marauder. I think that's from an American publication, I think. And here's that one again. We're just going to refer to that one. But then if we look at this one with 500 odd detections, this again started with non-biometric evidence links leading to this complete and utter great mess emerging. And the reason it's skewed this way is the guy fractured his leg later in the series and kept going backwards and forwards that way. We only found that out after he was arrested. So then we start looking at the commuter poacher. These are all you find them in texts about environmental criminology. If I now look at that, this is a real job in London. Where this particular model of shoe print had appeared and was quite rare and appeared in a couple of clusters. And we actually caught the person for that. So we're all right. So if you look at Cohn and Felson's triangle, crime triangle, we've got the offender, the victim, and the suspect, and this circle hypothesis, and this sort of affair here. What about this thing? These are 10mm tool marks. All we did was we could search by evidence type, search by method, search by anything, any angle. And this, when I mapped this in map info, up came this. And these were 10mm marks. And the suspect actually was living there. And it turned out his mum worked at the hospital, his girlfriend was there, and over here, he used to go drinking and get his drugs and stuff. So we will see these things, they do emerge. So we get the journey to crime, geographical location. So when you've got all this developed and working properly, that 80% of stuff that's recovered is just stored as a gold mine. You get suspect profiles, corridor theory, and then the crime triangles. What about the crime triangle? There's the victim, location, the offender. Take one away and it can't happen. So what they usually do, the police patrol there and chase them away, and they go to the next division next door. You haven't got rid of them at all, you need evidence. So about how many dimensions are there to each side of this thing? Well, they've got all the intelligence sources at the location. You've got records. You've got geographical data. There's human witness evidence. There's signals, CCTV. There's open source data. There's human intelligence, covert human information, and there's also forensic evidence there. And inside this, there can be clusters of different kernel density to do different crimes. What about this, the victim? This is where this model's a bit inadequate. Same thing. We've got all of that and more. And what about the suspect? Same again. We've got all of this material. So if you've got the use of the systems, and systems are entity led, in that you can look for entities in them, not without to read reams and reams of free text. And AI may help with this to unravel this. And also associated with each facet, you get all of this: biometric, impression, print, trace, witness, signals, open source. And it's all set inside contextual data, geographical and temporal. So the real model really looks something like this. It's four-dimensional, because this suspect in time can be hitting other victims over here and so on. One thing's for sure: if foreign doesn't exist, then you're not going to make the link between that one and this one. And if you're not efficient on this, you're not going to make the link across there either. So the whole point of it is, when you look at it, you can look at current and past trends. So if you start looking at this thing, it's as simple as a little flat triangle. And without evidence, you don't get rid of the nuisance. You just move them somewhere else. So there we are. So that, moving on, because there's a lot of material here, so I'll try and speed up a little bit. So what do? We code and categorize the forensic data. We create databases and map the data. We use the forensic data and maps to identify patterns. And our processes are fingerprint matching, DNA profile, materials matching, physical biological analysis, and the matching of physical marks. So we have national systems. We have the fingerprint system, we have the DNA system, we've got the national ballistics intelligence system, and the national footwear reference collection. So we can also align it to methods, behaviors. So one thing, if you look at, what's his name, Rosmo's Rigel, yeah, 40% of the time the offender will be in the geographical profile from a cluster, which means 60% of the time they're not there. How would you know who records and uses a proper language to define offenders in volume crime? If you look at Cantor's book, there is a language for that, and that will only work, Rosmos, if they fit particular sets of profiles. If they are expressive, if they're conservative and adaptive, they're very cunning, forensically aware. If they're expressive, and that means they will punch people in the face, set fire to the place, write graffiti everywhere, and they wouldn't give a hoot if they broke in the next door, then that is not what you're going to find when you run the profile. One of the big things now, forensic services have taken on board in the Met facial recognition. It's all part, and digital forensics. They're not in a separate computer engineers department or anything now. They're all under the umbrella of forensic services. And these are all other forms of intelligence. Now, if you take this, if we get frequencies of common evidence, fingerprints are found at 25% of scenes, and that includes ones that could be eliminated as people in the property, because criminals will cover their hands. And then we're talking about volume crime. DNA, why is it 9%? Well, you've got spit, bleed, or do something there if you're not covered up for you to find it. So poorly performing police forces are less than 5%. Better ones are 9 to 10. What about the other 90% you're not seeing at all? It's not a magic fix. It's good when you got it, bad when you haven't. Shoe marks back in 2003, they're now up in the 25% range. And in fact, a lot of police forces get about 10% of their burglary detections from the National Footwear Reference Collection facility. And tool marks are much higher now as well. And then the intervention rate. So all this enables you to work things out. So they create a different layer and an independent aspect to the crime scenes and another layer of intelligence forensics. Here's one here. We've got a series of burglaries in North London. The recovery rate's 1 in 5. There's 5 crimes in the cluster. So rule of thumb, you could have up to 25 crimes, or could be just 5. So you've got a range that the analyst can quote. With DNA, if you're recovering at 9% and you've got 3 linked scenes, you could have up to 90 odd scenes per link, or it could be 3. So the range, you know, is probably 3 to a couple of hundred scenes. We used to find, rule of thumb used to be around about 30 scenes between each link because of the percentage rate that they're found at. They don't always conveniently leave DNA every time. So we look at it and decide which clusters are interesting. So we know how many marks are recovered in the same time those 7 were found on that map. So we divide that number into that one and we get a probability number. We don't need to run the whole Bayesian equation because we've got all the terms for it anyway. We've got all this bit here. So that we've got. So we don't have to fiddle around with that. How many do we need for a link? And if we'd run comparative case analysis on this case, so it gives us 12 cases because these ones haven't got the shoe mark out of them, the Reebok 49, but they have got all the other features. So what we get is, on that number, if you did run the whole equation, it's all of about 11 zeros to 6 to 1, which is highly significant. So it's good enough to say you've got a series. There are 20 odd thousand patterns of shoes on the market in Europe, and you only need, most shoe marks are in this area here, and you only need 2 or 3 to suggest a series. You need other things, distance, separation, and so on. But you can see with forensics, and the other thing is, if they're common, if they're uncommon, it's highly significant to add in an analytical product. If it's moderately common, moderate significance, and weak, most of them tend to be in these 2 at the top here, and that's just footwear. So I'll move on from that. The book was used. I had an email from Homeland Security Cross-Border Laboratory in 2017, and they said your book was extraordinarily helpful in setting up the business model for borders, forensic intelligence borders model, the forensic intelligence attribution program. This is their slides I had permission to use that we presented at the IAI in San Antonio in 2018. These are the standard intelligence sources: geographical, human intelligence, records, criminal records, fingerprint records, DNA records, and whatever. Signals, which is mobile phones, computers, all the rest of it. Open source, and what about that? What else could we do? Well, this is what they want to do. They called it forint. So that was Robert Harvey, who was their man there, produced that term. And they had these processes. So we look at a process to deal with it all: locations, collections, samples. So you've got soil, pollens, contaminants in drugs, and so on. And it goes to the lab, they run tests and they run the analysis and they get forensic information. And that, this is a sort of an outlay. They've got the central analysis here and all the different inputs and outputs from it. And their big problem, of course, is human trafficking, drugs on the southern border. When this was originally produced, we produced a joint PowerPoint. I was the dinosaur that produced all the old stuff leading up to the book, and then they presented this. The thing was, by the time this was done, we had to change the title to All Borders of America. So you won't find them crowing it about on their website, crowing about it, but it's on all your borders and all your airports. Why would you look at pollens? Well, pollens get trapped from the atmosphere and all the drugs they're manufactured and tells them down to like county level all across the world where they're from. And you can upstream by getting to the different nodes in criminal markets and shut them down. 2016, they recovered a few kilograms of fentanyl. 2017, 1.4 metric tons running their model. So it's good model. So this is it. So you get sample linkage, get linkage to geographical areas. You get all of the usual biometrics and so on. Instead of throwing away things, you can find the same DNA turning up from someone packaging drugs. They're not in your database, but they're somewhere else. When we did this in the UK, back called Operation Endorse, we backtracked cocaine from the streets of London that were cut with a chemical contaminant. We got the purity reports and then tracked down several customs seizures of different types, plus fast parcels and all that, back to wholesalers and all the way back to Trinidad and Tobago. And because we actually sequentially treated everything in our very modern labs, we actually found out when we ran it, to our surprise, we didn't have foreign nationals. There's a crime family from North London that set it all up, and one of them went ident on this stuff because he'd been going out there. So that's how that works. So we're nearly done. So the other thing is in laboratories, and there is a report from the NIJ about this, it covers this, which kindly gives me 2 citations in it, which I thought was very nice of them, about legacy data in laboratories. You have to involve the labs because the labs set standards for things, they maintain libraries of things and so on. And what you do is you meet with those. You have to have regular meetings to discuss it all. And they are absolute mine of information if you're setting up a model. So the legacy data is the combined data sets of investigations. And every case they deal with has a great big fat file, but what you get from them is a statement of evidence and perhaps some images. There's a couple of pages. But inside all of that legacy data, there's a tremendous lot of linking material and a tremendous amount of knowledge with those people because they see material from quite wide distances coming across their desks or their benches. So there we go. So this is what you do to sort out legacy data. If you haven't got access to it, you have to review internal, external working practices, examine your business plans and so on. Is the data fit for use? Can you get it at all? Gary Pugh, who's now the United Kingdom Forensic Science Regulator, was my boss at Scotland Yard. He was the Director of Forensic Services. And Pugh went livid when a privatized laboratory wanted to charge us for our own legacy data, and he's now reviewing everything to do with all the disciplines in forensic science at the moment. This is the model I had in the Met. You see that one with the computer hub from Homeland Security? Same thing. Where all our inputs and outputs, we can either have a no suspect identified, a problem, and then it goes out to the divisions, we call them boroughs, and through for processing, or if we get somebody is ident, we've got someone, but we could just go straight through and charge them a one job, but there might be they've done 50 or 60. So we get more value by actually creating an intelligence product with that. We do it very quickly. We don't hold the process up. So then the officer decides, what they can do with it. So it gives them support. Lastly, with Crime Science Limited, Ian Oldfield has created a cyber city with 110,000 inhabitants with very detailed personal information of all these cyber persons. They've got phones, they're parts of gangs over here, the BX1 boys and so on. So here we've got a gang member living there, all the data, what his mobile phone is, there's all kinds of stuff in there. There's businesses, there's even a prison in this city, there's everything to do with it. Why make it? Because under data protection, if you want to model modern systems, you're not allowed real data if you're a contractor outside. So if you want to model anything properly, this is modeled on London. It's very realistic for training analysts and so on. So he's seeking people that want to have licenses for this. And there's quite a bit of interest in it internationally. So when we look at that, that's just the location and the information about this person and this gang here. Sorry about the text, is small. But when we look at the activities of the gang, see they're color coded here, start crime mapping it. You notice this guy's not doing anything much around where he lives. It's in 2 clusters. But it is what it is. We've used it at the European Institute 2 or 3 years ago, running it with a GIS mapping program, and it runs very well with quality mapping programs. So it's very realistic. I know one large American contractor, I can't say who it is, used it to design a very large city's new crime recording system because it could model everything properly with it. So that's it. So the cyber city. So the offender's anchor point is there. So on that previous map, which was an enlargement. So there we go. So with an analysis, it starts before you get crime series trends, offenders, and forensics, a big part of that. It is during and after. You might wonder why people teaching crime analysis in the 20th century didn't mention forensics. It's because I suspect that they were working in countries that had a very poor, fragmented model. And because we were more organised in the UK, more sorted out with it, you've also got legal problems. Can you just take things and do cold searches of material from people in custody? You have to have permission. So we had to change the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. So you have to look at the law, what you're allowed to do. But this is reproducible. It's you can supervise it. It does work. I did about 6,500, my team, case reports when I was head of Forensic Intelligence in the Met Intel Bureau. I ran the forensic desk. When I left, because of cuts and austerity, it was split into 3 lumps inside forensic services. It really has to be in the Intel Directorate if you're going to function properly, but it still works outside of it, and it shouldn't be an ad hoc add-on thing. You've got to build it into your model. So there we are.